Natalie Brooks didn't plan to pitch a billionaire. She only wanted her car to start. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and she was sitting in the parking lot of Riverside Elementary, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, listening to the engine click uselessly for the fourth time. Dead. Completely dead. Her daughter Zoe was inside at art club, blissfully unaware that their car, the car Natalie had bought for $800 3 years ago and kept alive through YouTube tutorials and prayer, had finally given up. Natalie pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. Balance, $47.23. The mechanic's quote from last week echoed in her head. $200 for the alternator, $80 for labor. She scrolled to her brother Marcus's contact. He'd loaned her money before, reluctantly, with lectures about financial planning and priorities, but he was the only option she had. She typed quickly before she could overthink it. Marcus, I know I still owe you from last month, but my car died in the school parking lot and I need $200 for repairs. I get paid Friday. I can pay you back $50 a week. Please, I can't lose this job. She hit send, set the phone down, closed her eyes. 4 minutes later, her phone buzzed. I think you have the wrong number. Natalie's stomach dropped. She grabbed the phone and stared at the screen. One wrong digit. She'd texted a stranger. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, she typed frantically. Please ignore that. Wrong number. She locked the screen and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat like it had betrayed her. Then it buzzed again. Why do you need the car? She stared at the message. What kind of stranger asks follow-up questions? I need to get to work, she typed back, against her better judgment. And my daughter needs to get to school. We live outside the bus route. What do you do for work? Natalie hesitated. This was getting weird, but something about the directness of the questions felt professional, not creepy, just efficient. I'm a waitress, breakfast shift at Lou's Diner, 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. Another pause, then. And your car needs $200 worth of repairs? Plus labor, $280 total. What happens if you don't fix it? Her throat tightened. I lose my job. I can't afford Uber every day. And I'm already on my last warning for being late. There was a longer pause this time. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, I'll make you a deal. Natalie blinked at the screen. What kind of deal? I'll pay for your car repairs, all of it. Plus I'll cover a rental while yours is in the shop. Her heart stopped. Why would you do that? Because I'm curious about something. About what? You. You said you can't lose this job. That implies you've thought about other jobs. Better jobs. What would you do if you could do anything? Natalie stared at her phone, completely blindsided by the question. No one had asked her that in years. Not since before Zoe, not since before her ex left. Not since before her entire life became about survival. I don't know, she typed. Something that pays better than $12 an hour plus tips. That's not an answer. That's a salary requirement. I'm asking what you're good at. What you think about when you're not busy surviving. She sat back in her seat, phone in her lap, and thought about it. What was she good at? She was good at making things work with nothing. Good at stretching $20 into a week's worth of meals. Good at finding solutions when there weren't any obvious ones. She was good at managing chaos. I'm good at fixing problems, she finally typed. Figuring out how to make things work when they shouldn't. Give me an example. Last month, the diner's POS system crashed during breakfast rush. Manager was freaking out. I grabbed receipt paper and a calculator and hand-wrote every order with table numbers and timestamps. Kept everything moving until tech support showed up 2 hours later. Nobody's food was late. Impressive. What else? I reorganized the diner's prep system so we waste less food. Cut our spoilage by 30%. Manager gave me a 0.50 raise. You should have asked for equity. Natalie laughed out loud. It's a diner, not a startup. Everything's a startup if you think about it right. She didn't know what to say to that. Then another message came through. Here's my deal. I'll fix your car. But in exchange, you're going to pitch me a business idea. I don't have a business idea. Then you have 24 hours to come up with one. Her heart started racing. This is insane. I don't even know who you are. My name is Carter, Carter Hayes. Google me. Natalie's hands shook as she opened her browser and typed the name. The results loaded. Carter Hayes, founder and managing partner, Hayes Ventures. Net worth, $4.1 billion, known for aggressive investment strategy and brutal pitch meetings. Her mouth went dry. She'd accidentally texted one of the most ruthless venture capitalists in the country. Oh my God, she typed. Still interested, he replied. She should have said no, should have thanked him politely and blocked the number. Instead, she typed, what kind of business idea are you looking for? The kind that solves a real problem, your problem, something you wish existed but doesn't. And if I pitch you something and you hate it, then I fix your car anyway and we never speak again. And if you like it, then I invest and you stop waitressing. Natalie stared at her phone, heart pounding. This was either the opportunity of a lifetime or the setup for a disaster. 24 hours, she typed. Starting now? Starting now, don't waste them. Across the city, in an office that overlooked the financial district, Carter Hayes leaned back in his chair and stared at his phone. He hadn't planned to respond to that text. He'd been in back-to-back meetings all day, reviewing pitch decks from Stanford MBAs with polished presentations and 5-year projections. Every single one had bored him to tears. They were playing it safe, iterating on existing ideas, chasing trends instead of creating them. And then this text had come through, raw, desperate, real. I can't lose this job. That kind of desperation, the kind that came from actual stakes, not theoretical market opportunity, was rare. Most of the founders he met were playing with house money, trust funds, safety nets. They could afford to fail. This woman couldn't, which meant if she managed to come up with something good in the next 24 hours, she'd be the kind of founder who didn't quit when things got hard. Because she'd already survived hard. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Your 7 p.m. is here, the Stanford team with the AI scheduling app. Carter sighed. Another polished pitch for another unnecessary app. He typed back, cancel it. Something more interesting came up. Then he pulled up the contact. For his preferred mechanic, the one who worked miracles on exotic cars for triple the normal rate. He sent a text. I need a favor. Alternator replacement on a... What kind of car did she say? He scrolled back through the messages. She hadn't mentioned the make or model. He texted her. What kind of car? 2007 Honda Civic. Why? Sending someone to pick it up tonight. You'll have a rental delivered to your address within 2 hours. You don't have my address. You're at Riverside Elementary. I'll have the rental delivered there. Black SUV, keys in a lockbox. Code is 1224. There was a long pause. How do you know where I am? You said your daughter is inside. School parking lot was a logical assumption. Riverside is the only elementary school in the county outside the bus route. Another pause. This is either really generous or really creepy. It's efficient. Stop overthinking and start thinking about your pitch. I'm a waitress, not an entrepreneur. You're a problem solver. That's what entrepreneurs are. Now go pick up your daughter and start solving. He set his phone down and smiled. This was going to be interesting. Natalie sat in the rental SUV, which was nicer than any car she'd ever driven, with Zoe buckled in the back, eating McDonald's chicken nuggets. Mama, whose car is this? Zoe asked. A friend's, Natalie said, which was technically true if you stretch the definition of friend to include billionaire stranger who's somehow helping me. It smells new. Yeah, baby, it does. Natalie's mind was racing. 24 hours to come up with a business idea. What problem did she want to solve? She thought about her life, about the things that made it harder than it needed to be. Childcare, always a nightmare, expensive, unreliable, never aligned with her schedule. Transportation, obviously. But that problem was already solved by Uber and Lyft. Food costs, meal planning, time management. She pulled into the parking lot of her apartment complex and carried Zoe inside. After putting Zoe to bed, Natalie sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and started writing. Problems I have. 1. Childcare is too expensive. 2. Shift work schedules are unpredictable. 3. Can't afford to miss work, but also can't afford last-minute childcare. 4. Most daycares don't cover early morning or late evening. 5. Other parents probably have the same problem. She stared at that last line. Other parents probably have the same problem. What if there was a way to connect parents who needed flexible childcare with other parents who had availability? Not a daycare, not a babysitter service, unless you co-op worker, a community network. She started sketching it out. Parents would join a local network, log their schedules, offer to watch other parents' kids during their off hours, earn credits. Use those credits when they needed help. No money changing hands. Just a barter system for the most valuable currency any parent had, time. She worked until 2 a.m., refining the idea, thinking through the logistics, anticipating problems. By the time she finally collapsed into bed, she had 10 pages of notes and a name. Chain Care. Because it was about creating a chain of support, a network that caught you when you fell. The next morning, Natalie dropped Zoe at school in the rental SUV and headed to the diner for her shift. She worked on autopilot, pouring coffee and taking orders while her brain continued building the pitch. At 1:15 p.m., her phone buzzed. "How's the pitch coming?" "I have an idea," she typed back. "Don't know if it's any good." "Then let's find out. Meet me at my office at 6 p.m. "I can't. I have to pick up my daughter." "Bring her." To a pitch meeting. "Why not? She's part of the problem you're solving, isn't she?" Natalie stared at the message. "You're serious." "Always. Address below. Don't be late." At 5:47 p.m., Natalie walked into the lobby of Hayes Ventures with Zoe's hand in hers. The building was all glass and steel, intimidatingly modern. The receptionist looked at her like she'd walked into the wrong place. "I'm here to see Carter Hayes," Natalie said, voice steadier than she felt. The receptionist's eyebrows rose. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes." The woman typed something, frowned, then picked up the phone. After a brief conversation, she looked up in surprise. "Top floor, he's expecting you." Zoe squeezed Natalie's hand as they stepped into the elevator. "Mama, where are we?" "I'm going to talk to someone about an idea I had." "What kind of idea?" "A way to help parents help each other." "That sounds nice." "Yeah, baby, it does." The elevator opened directly into a massive office, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a view that made Natalie's stomach drop. And behind a desk that looked like it cost more than her car, Carter Hayes. He was younger than she'd expected. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair, sharp suit, piercing blue-gray eyes that looked like they could calculate her net worth in 3 seconds. He stood when she entered. "Natalie." Not a question, a statement. "Mr. Hayes." "Carter," he looked at Zoe. "And you must be Zoe." Zoe hid behind Natalie's leg. "She's shy," Natalie explained. "Smart. Strangers are dangerous." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. Let's hear it." Natalie sat, Zoe climbing into her lap. She pulled out her notebook, 10 pages of handwritten notes that suddenly felt incredibly unprofessional. Carter leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "You have 10 minutes. Go." She took a breath. "It's called Chain Care, a co-op network for parents who need flexible childcare." She explained the concept. The credit system, the vetting process, the app interface, the community building. Carter didn't interrupt, didn't take notes, just listened with an intensity that made her feel like every word mattered. When she finished, there was silence. Then he leaned forward. "What's your user acquisition strategy?" "Start small. One neighborhood, word of mouth. Parents trust other parents more than they trust advertising." "What's your liability concern?" "Background checks, references, rating system. Same as any gig economy platform." "What's your revenue model?" "Subscription fee, $9.99 a month. Enough to cover platform costs and insurance. Low enough that it's accessible." "What makes this different from existing babysitter apps?" "Those are transactional. This is communal. You're not hiring a stranger. You're joining a network of parents who are all in the same boat. There's accountability because your reputation matters. You're not just a user. You're a member." Carter was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. You built this in 24 hours. Yes. Most founders take months to get to this level of clarity. Most founders probably aren't desperate. He turned to look at her. Desperation is the best motivator. Is that a yes? That's a maybe. I need to see if you can execute. Ideas are cheap. Execution is everything. What do you want me to do? Build a prototype. Get 10 parents to sign up. Prove the concept works in the real world. Do that, and I'll invest $500,000. Natalie's heart stopped. $500,000. That's what it takes to build a platform properly. Infrastructure, legal, marketing, hiring. You can't bootstrap this. I'm a waitress. I don't know how to build an app. Then learn, or find someone who does. You have 60 days. And if I fail? Then you go back to waitressing, but at least you'll have tried. He pulled a business card from his desk and handed it to her. My direct line. Use it when you have questions. Not if, when. Natalie took the card with shaking hands. Why are you doing this? She asked. Carter looked at her for a long moment. Because 10 years ago, I was sleeping in my car and cold calling investors from a burner phone. Someone gave me a shot when I had nothing but an idea and hunger. I'm returning the favor. He walked to his desk and pulled out an envelope. Your car's fixed. Keys and receipt are in here. The alternator was shot, but we also replaced your battery and starter. Shouldn't have problems for a while. Natalie opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a receipt marked, paid in full, and underneath it, a check for $10,000. What's this? She whispered. Seed funding. Cover your expenses for the next 2 months so you can focus on building. Pay yourself a salary. Quit the diner. Work on this full time. I can't accept this. It's not charity. It's an investment. I expect equity. We'll formalize terms once you prove the concept. Natalie looked at Zoe, who was staring wide-eyed at the city view. Then back at Carter. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Prove me right. The next morning, Natalie gave her 2 weeks' notice at the diner. Her manager, Lou, stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're quitting? To do what? Start a business. What kind of business? A childcare co-op. An app that connects parents. Lou crossed his arms. You have funding for this? Yes. From who? An investor. Lou shook his head. Nat, I've known you 3 years. You're a good worker, but starting a business, that's risky. You have Zoe to think about. That's exactly why I'm doing this. She worked her last 2 weeks with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Every spare moment, she was researching, learning, planning. She joined online forums for startup founders, watched YouTube videos about app development, read articles about user acquisition and growth hacking, and she started recruiting. First, she went to Zoe's school, stood outside at pickup, and handed out flyers. Are you a parent who needs flexible childcare? Join Chain Care, a community network where parents help each other. Most people threw the flyers away. A few took them politely. 3 actually texted her. One was Derek Chen, a software engineer who'd recently been laid off and was doing freelance work from home. His wife worked nights as a nurse. They needed someone to watch their twin boys from 6-9 p.m. 3 days a week. I can't afford a babysitter, Derek said when they met for coffee. But I'd be happy to watch your daughter during the day when my wife is sleeping. That's exactly the point, Natalie said. We trade time. You help me, I help you. And you're building an app for this? Trying to. I need a developer. Derek raised his eyebrows. I'm a developer. I know. That's why I'm asking if you'd be interested in building it. For how much? I can't pay you yet, but I can offer equity, 10%. Once we get funded, you'll get a real salary. Derek leaned back, considering. Who's your investor? Carter Hayes. Derek nearly spit out his coffee. The Carter. Hayes? Hayes Ventures? Yeah. And he's funding you? If I can prove the concept works in 60 days. Derek stared at her. That's insane. I know. I'm in. Over the next 6 weeks, Natalie and Derek worked 18-hour days. Derek built the app. Natalie recruited users. She went to every parent group she could find, posted in Facebook groups, left flyers at libraries, community centers, pediatrician offices. Slowly, painfully, the network grew. 10 parents, then 15, then 25. They ran their first official chain in week 4. Sarah, a nurse, needed someone to watch her daughter from 5-7 a.m. before school. Miguel, a baker who got off work at 4 a.m., agreed to do it. In exchange, Sarah watched Miguel's son after school 3 days a week. It worked. No money changed hands, no formal contracts. Just 2 parents helping each other because they were part of the same network. By week 6, they had 37 active users and over 200 completed childcare exchanges. Natalie documented everything, took screenshots of testimonials, tracked metrics, built a case. On day 58, she texted Carter, "Ready when you are." His response came immediately. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m., my office." Natalie walked into Carter's office with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. This time, she had a presentation. Derek had helped her build a slide deck. She had data, testimonials, proof. Carter gestured to the chair. "Show me." She opened her laptop and walked him through everything. The user growth, the engagement metrics, the testimonials from parents who said Chain Care had changed their lives. Carter watched in silence, clicked through the app on his phone, read every testimonial. Finally, he looked up. "You did it," Natalie exhaled. "We did it." "No, you did it. You found the developer. You recruited the users. You built the community. You executed." He pulled out a contract. 500,000, 15% equity. I'll handle legal, insurance, scaling. You handle product and community. Deal? Natalie stared at the contract, at the number that would change her life. Deal. They shook hands. As she stood to leave, Carter stopped her. "Natalie." "Yeah? You said you were good at fixing problems. You weren't lying." She smiled. "Neither were you when you said desperation is the best motivator. Stick around long enough, and I'll teach you the rest." 6 months later, Chain Care had grown to 15 cities, over 10,000 active users, press coverage in TechCrunch, Fast Company, and the Wall Street Journal. Natalie had hired a team, built an office, moved into a better apartment. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a CEO. And through it all, Carter had been there, not as a silent investor, but as a mentor, a sounding board, a relentless challenger who pushed her to think bigger, move faster, execute better. They met every Tuesday for what he called office hours, 2 hours where she could ask him anything. At first, the questions were about business, strategy, hiring, fundraising. But slowly, they started talking about other things, about her life, his life, the things that had shaped them. She learned that he'd grown up poor, that his father had left when he was 8, that his mother had worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, that he'd put himself through state school on scholarships and student loans, that he'd started his first company with $3,000 borrowed from a pawn shop, that his ruthless reputation came from the fact that he'd learned early that the world didn't give you anything, you had to take it. He learned that her ex had left when she was 5 months pregnant, that she'd worked up until the day before she gave birth, that she'd gone back to work 2 weeks later because she couldn't afford not to, that she was terrified every day of failing, of proving everyone right who'd said she'd never amount to anything, that she loved her daughter more than air but lived in constant fear of not being enough. "You're more than enough," Carter said one Tuesday when she'd confessed that fear. "You built a company from nothing in 6 months. You're in 15 cities. You have 10,000 users. You're enough. I got lucky. You gave me a shot. I give a lot of people shots. Most of them fail. You didn't. What if I do? Fail, I mean. Eventually. Then you'll fail forward, learn, build something else. That's what founders do." She looked at him across the conference table they always met at. "Is that what you did?" 3 times. My first company went bankrupt. My second got acquired for pennies, and I was pushed out. My third is the one that made me. And if it hadn't, I'd have tried a 4th time, because the alternative was going back to sleeping in my car, and I'd already done that. There was something in his eyes when he said it, something raw, something that made her realize that for all his billions, for all his success, he was still the kid who'd slept in his car. Just like she was still the girl who'd stretched ramen into 2 meals. They understood each other in a way that didn't require words. 1 year later, ChainCare had raised a Series A, $5 million from a top-tier venture firm, with Carter leading the round. They were in 50 cities, over 100,000 users, profitable. Natalie had been featured on the cover of Forbes' 30 Under 30 issue, and she was exhausted. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and she was still in the office reviewing a presentation for a partnership meeting the next morning. Her phone buzzed. "You're still there, aren't you?" She smiled. Carter had a sixth sense for when she was working too late. "How did you know?" "Because you always are. Go home, the presentation is fine." "You haven't even seen it." "I don't need to. You don't do mediocre work," says the man who's probably still in his office too. A pause. "Touché. Want company?" Her heart skipped. "What?" "I'm 3 blocks away. I'll bring food. We can both work too late together." She hesitated. They'd never spent time together outside of business hours. Never crossed that line. Okay. 20 minutes later, Carter walked into her office carrying Thai food and 2 bottles of sparkling water. "You know my order," she said, surprised. "You get the same thing every Tuesday." They ate at her desk, talking about the business, about the upcoming partnership, about her plans for expansion. But as the conversation went on, it drifted. "Do you ever miss it?" Natalie asked. "The beginning, when everything was new and terrifying. Every day. Really? The stakes were higher. Every decision mattered. Now I have enough money that I can afford to fail. Back then, I couldn't. It made me sharper. I feel like I'm still there, like one wrong move and it all falls apart. That's because you are. You've scaled, but you're not safe yet. You won't be until you have a dominant market position and diversified revenue. You're still in the danger zone." "That's comforting," he smiled. "You want comfort? You picked the wrong career." "I didn't pick this career. You picked it for me. I gave you an opportunity. You picked what to do with it." She looked at him, really looked at him. At the sharp lines of his face, the intensity in his eyes, the way he looked at her like she was a puzzle he was still trying to solve. "Why did you really answer my text that day?" she asked. "The real reason." Carter was quiet for a long moment. "Because your message reminded me that there are still people fighting. Really fighting. Not for a promotion or a better office. For survival, for their kids. That kind of fight, it's pure, it's honest. And I hadn't seen it in a long time." "And that's all it was? Professional interest?" He held her gaze. "At first. And now? Now it's more complicated." "How?" He stood up, walked to the window of her office, looked out at the city. "I invest in companies, Natalie, not people. But with you, it stopped being about the company a long time ago." Her heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've spent the last year trying to keep this professional, trying to maintain boundaries, but I can't anymore." He turned to look at her. "I'm saying that somewhere between the pitch meeting and now, I stopped seeing you as a founder I invested in, and started seeing you as the most remarkable person I've ever met." Natalie stood up slowly. "Carter, I know this is a bad idea. I'm your investor. There's a power dynamic. There are 1,000 reasons why this is unprofessional and complicated." "Yeah," she said quietly, "there are. So tell me to leave, tell me to keep my distance, and I will." She walked toward him, stopped a few feet away. "What if I don't want you to?" His eyes searched hers. "Then you need to be sure, because if we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back to what we were." "Good," she said, "because I don't want to go back." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was a year of restraint breaking all at once. His hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck. They kissed like they were drowning, and each other was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you walked into my office with 10 pages of handwritten notes and proved me right," she laughed. "That's very specific. I'm a very specific person. I've noticed." He pulled her close, and for the first time in a year, Natalie felt like she could breathe. They kept it quiet at first, Not because they were ashamed, but because Natalie didn't want anyone thinking she'd gotten where she was because of who she was dating. She'd earned this, every bit of it. Carter understood. He'd spent his whole career being underestimated. He knew what it was like to have people attribute your success to anything but your own work. So they were careful, professional in public, private everywhere else. But slowly, inevitably, people started to notice. The way he looked at her in meetings, the way she smiled when his name came up, the way they always seemed to be in the same city at the same time. 6 months into their relationship, a tech blogger posted a photo of them having dinner together with the caption, Hayes Ventures Carter Hayes, spotted with ChainCare CEO Natalie Brooks. New investment or something more. The comments exploded. Some were supportive, most were skeptical. A few were outright vicious. Of course she's dating her investor. That's how women get ahead in tech. Another female founder sleeping her way to the top. Hayes Ventures investment makes a lot more sense now. Natalie read the comments and felt sick. Carter found her in her office, staring at her laptop with tears in her eyes. Don't read the comments, he said gently. They think I slept my way here. They're idiots. What if they're right? What if people only take me seriously because of you? He knelt in front of her chair, took her hands in his. Natalie, look at me. She did. I invested in ChainCare before I knew what you looked like. I invested because your idea was brilliant and your execution was flawless. I fell for you after you proved yourself. Not before. Not instead of after. But people will always think, let them think whatever they want. You know the truth. I know the truth. That's all that matters. Is it? Yes. Because at the end of the day, your company speaks for itself. Your metrics speak for themselves. Your success speaks for itself. The noise doesn't matter. She leaned into him and he held her while she cried out the frustration and anger and fear. When she finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and took a breath. Okay, I'm done feeling sorry for myself. Good. Because you have a board meeting in an hour and you need to look like the CEO who just closed a partnership deal with 3 major retailers. She laughed despite herself. I really did do that, didn't I? You really did. Okay, let's go prove them all wrong. Two years later, ChainCare was acquired. A major parenting platform, one of the biggest in the world, offered $47 million for the company. Natalie's share, after investors and employees got paid, was $18 million. $18 million. She stared at the number on the offer sheet and couldn't breathe. What do you think? Carter asked. They were in his office, reviewing the terms. I think I can't believe this is real. It's real. The question is, do you want to sell? I don't know. This is my company, my baby, and you've built it into something extraordinary. But the question is, do you want to keep building it under someone else's umbrella? Or do you want to cash out and build something new? What would you do? I can't answer that for you. Yes, you can. What would you do? He leaned back in his chair, considering. I'd sell. Not because I don't believe in ChainCare, but because you're 32 years old. You just built a company from nothing and sold it for 8 figures. You have the credibility, the network, and the capital to do anything you want. Why limit yourself to one thing? What if I fail next time? Then you'll have failed with a safety net. That's a luxury most founders don't get. Use it. She thought about it, about Zoe, who was 9 now and thriving, about the life she'd built, about the fact that she didn't have to survive anymore. She could actually choose. Okay, she said, I'll sell. You're sure? I'm sure. They finalized the deal 3 weeks. Later, Natalie woke up the morning after the acquisition closed and checked her bank account. The number made her dizzy. She called Carter. I'm rich, she said, voice shaking. You earned it. I don't know what to do. Take a breath, take a vacation. Then come back and build something even bigger. What if I don't want to build something bigger? Then don't. The point is, you get to choose now. That's freedom. She thought about that. About freedom. About choice. About the fact that 3 years ago she'd been sitting in a broken-down car in a school parking lot, begging a stranger for $200. And now she was a millionaire. Carter? Yeah? Thank you for answering. Thank you for texting the wrong number. 6 months later, epilogue. Natalie walked into a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, looking for a familiar face. She spotted Carter at a corner table, typing on his laptop. She slid into the seat across from him. "You're late," he said without looking up. "Traffic." "Unacceptable excuse," she smiled. "What are you working on?" "Due diligence on a biotech startup. Their science is solid, but their business model is a mess." "Sounds like a nightmare." "It is, which is why I'm going to pass." He closed his laptop and looked at her. "So, what's your next move?" Natalie pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "I have an idea." Carter raised his eyebrows. "Already?" "I've had 6 months off. That's long enough." He opened the folder, started reading. After a few minutes, he looked up. "This is ambitious. That's not a no. It's definitely not a no. When do you want to start?" "Next month, after Zoe's birthday." "You'll need a team." "I have a list." "You'll need funding." "I'm hoping you'll lead the round," he smiled. "You know I don't invest in first-time founders anymore." "I'm not a first-time founder. I'm a second-time founder with a successful exit." "Touché." He leaned back. "What's the valuation?" $10 million pre-money. Raising $2 million that's aggressive for a company that doesn't exist yet. "You taught me to be aggressive," he laughed. "I did, didn't I?" "So, are you in?" Carter looked at her. This woman who'd texted him by accident 3 years ago and changed his entire life. Who'd proven him right in every way that mattered. Who'd become not just a brilliant founder, but the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. "I'm in," he said. "On one condition." "What's that?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Natalie's breath caught. "Marry me," she stared at him. "You're proposing in a coffee shop?" "I'm proposing where it all started. With you asking me for something and me saying yes." Tears filled her eyes. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, leaned across the table, and kissed her. When they pulled apart, both smiling, Natalie shook her head in disbelief. "I can't believe I texted the wrong number." "Best mistake you ever made." "Second best," she corrected. "What's the first?" "Saying yes to your insane 24-hour deadline." He laughed. "Fair point." They sat there for a long time, planning her next company, planning their wedding, planning a future neither of them could have imagined 3 years ago. All because of one wrong number. One text sent in desperation, one billionaire who answered, and 2 people who learned that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned. They're accidents that turn into destiny.